Uh, Afternoon, everybody, or morning or night, whenever you're watching this. We're going to talk about books today. This is for a specific audience of people, but anybody can listen to it. I mean, I'm not blocking anybody from getting into this conversation. This is specifically this is going to be some eye-opening points I'm going to share with some people. Hopefully eye-opening for some of you out there who are writing books, have already written books, plan on writing some books. Happy Saturday afternoon, everyone. Y'all checking in. You can shout yourselves out in the comment section. Tell me your name and location. We're going to get into this in a minute. I'm going to introduce myself. Then I'm going to tell y'all what we're talking about. While we're talking about it, we are talking about what you do not know about the book, writing, publishing, selling world. If you plan on having books as any aspect of your business, there are some things you need to know about the book game that a lot of people don't know. I can tell by the questions that I get from people all the time. And I'm going to address that all here. And I got actually several I don't even know what I want to call these. We'll just call them points. For those of y'all who are in here, and for those of you watching on replay, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dre Baldwin. Many know me as Dre all day, former 9-year pro athlete, author of 31 books, creator. This whole brand philosophy framework called Work on Your Game is all about taking the mental tools, aspects, strategies, skills, attributes that you need to become a professional athlete and applying those tools at work and in everyday life. I'm doing these lives, as I've told you, I'm doing a series of these lives leading up to my event, which starts this upcoming Thursday. It's called Work on Your Game Live. It is specifically for the entrepreneurs who are selling their intellectual property. So if you want to write books, do speaking gigs, coaching, sell courses, workshops, anything like that, this is the event for you. You can get your ticket by going to that link right there, which is workonyourgame.live. It's the link in my bio. And I want to talk specifically about books, because I got some DMs over the last week from people asking me questions about writing books, and just the way that, just even the questions that people ask me told me that a lot of people really don't understand how the book game works. And a lot of people incorrectly think, I'll tell you right up front, without burying the lead, a lot of people incorrectly think that just because you open up Microsoft Word or Google Docs or whatever you're writing on, and you put your book together, and then you get a cover design, and you put it all together, then you put it out somewhere on the internet, that all of a sudden now, because you wrote a book, that the floodgates are going to open, and the heavens are going to part, and everything's going to be all happily ever after just because you wrote a book. And that is not the way the book game works. But I want to make sure everybody does understand how the book game works. I'm going to explain that again by telling you some things that many of you might not know about writing books, and I'll answer any questions around the subject when I get through my points here. So, as I said earlier, I've written 31 books. I wrote my first book probably like 12 or 13 years ago. Was just telling my early story of my background in basketball, because most of my audience when I first started out was all basketball players. Then later on, I started writing books about mindset, wrote books about playing overseas. I did that as well. More books on mindset, and today I write a lot of books on just overall strategy stuff. That's really my real area of focus, is strategic stuff, whether it be from mindset, personal development, professional development, whatever it is that people happen to be working on. That's what I talk about these days. But I've done several episodes, by the way, for anyone who wants to get like further continued education on this subject. I've done several podcast episodes on book writing, whether you're talking traditional versus self-publishing books, why you should write a book, tips for how to actually write a book, how to put together a book. All of those things are covered if you go over to my podcast, which is called the Work on Your Game podcast. I'm not going to go too deep into that. I want to get into these points here because I got several of them that I want to share of things that people do not know about writing books. So let's get into our points. And if anybody has a question or anything like that, usually people come in once I actually start talking. This is usually the way it's been when I do these live. So I'm going to go into my points, and if I can answer anybody's questions while I'm talking, you just let me know and we'll go from there. So number one point is, actually this is not even a point, honestly. I'll just say there's a lot of different ways that you can write a book. There's no right or wrong way to do it, and you can have your outline in place however you're writing it. Most people who come to me and they ask me a question about writing a book are not asking how do I actually sit down and write the book. Usually somebody who's asking me about a book, they're asking something that is about like the editing of the book or getting the book out or selling the book or how to use the book to get something extra to happen after the book is written. So usually they got that part done. Here's the number one thing that a lot of people don't understand about writing a book or just having a book is writing the book is only the first step. Writing a book is just step one of really is at least 4 steps that you have to go through if you're going to be an author. If you're going to be an author, the first step is writing the book. That's just the beginning of your work. It is not the end of your work. A lot of people think that's the end of the work just because you wrote a book. Now, people tell me I'm in the process of writing my first book as if that's an accomplishment. And I guess it is that you wrote the book, but just having a book doesn't mean anything. If we're talking about business here. Now, if you're talking, you just wrote the book just so you can serve your ego and you can say that you wrote a book, fine. But if your goal in writing a book is to serve your business, then writing a book alone doesn't really mean anything. What's going on? Who is that? Nuchi Chetara. How you doing? So understand that writing a book is only the first step. There's more that you have to do. All you did was just go and write it. We got to figure out what you're going to do next. And that's something that I'll be talking about. And specifically, I'll be talking about that more specifically at Work on Your Game Live next week. But that's the first point, that writing the book is just the first thing that you do. Here's the next point. If your goal in writing the book is to impact other people, understand that you need to do more than just write the book. You got to figure out, all right, how am I going to take this book and market and sell the book, or market and sell whatever I'm talking about in the book so that it can impact other people. Just having the book itself doesn't do anything because I'm assuming Noonie, what's going on, Noonie? I got your name right now. All right, somebody has to actually open the book and read it, right? Because if nobody opens your book and reads it, then they can't get any value from it. So whether that means they need to go download it, they got to go buy it, whatever they got to do to get your book, first of all, then they have to actually consume the book. And then whatever's in the book, they have to actually apply it. So all these things have to happen that you can't really control, but you can't control getting the book in their hands. That's your job. So this is why writing the book is just the first step. All right, you wrote a book. You got it. You holding it in your hand. You take a picture with the book. You can post it up on your IG and all that stuff. Now, what's the next step? How are you going to get anybody to know that there's some quality material in the book, and how are they going to get the value out of the book? That's a question that you, as the author, needs to answer. You got to take your author hat off, and you got to put on your salesperson hat. How do I get this book into people's hands? And again, Work on Your Game Live, we'll be talking about that a lot next week. Not specifically just for books, but for any entrepreneur out there who's selling your intellectual property, because we can package up intellectual property in many different ways. You could do it through a book, through a course, through a live event, through a speech, through a podcast, through whatever way you want to sell it, through one-on-one coaching, through mastermind groups, however you want to do it. But there, you have to take that intellectual property and actually get somebody else to want to consume it. That's the job. That's the hard work part. And again, we'll be talking about that starting next Thursday. So while you're writing the book, here's the next point. I won't even put these in number order because I got enough of them. I'm kind of going through them pretty quickly. I just want to make sure all y'all get the points. When you are writing your book, that's when you should be planning the marketing and promotion of your book. So a lot of people write books. And again, as I said, people will write a book and they'll be like, all right, well, I wrote a book, or I'm in the process of writing a book. But they haven't even thought about, all right, how am I going to get anybody to actually read my book? You see, you wrote the book, and you know how great it is, and you know why it's so amazing. You know what's on all 150 pages of your book, or all 65 pages of your book, but nobody else does. So how are you going to get anyone else to read your book? As the saying goes, the best time to plant a tree is 2 years ago, 10 years ago. The next best time to plant a tree is right now. What are you doing right now while you're in the process of writing your book so that you can ensure anybody's actually going to read your book? If any of you was following me, if you've been following me for at least a year, you might remember last year when I was getting ready to put out this book right here called The Third Day. I was showing y'all how I was working on the book. Because last year I was actually I was in Europe last summer, right around this time. It was a little bit after this last year, but I was working on this book. I was working on setting up the marketing and promotion of this. The pre-sale of this book came out in June of last year. And then the book itself came out on August the 3rd. I put it out on the 3rd day, August the 3rd, last summer. But all that time between this time last year and August when it came out, that's a 4-month period. And it was even longer than that All I was doing was just getting my audience ready for the release of the book so that I could actually sell copies of the book so people would actually read the book. That was the most important thing. It wasn't just having a book. It was getting people to actually acquire the book and then go read the book. And that's the pre-work that you have to do up front. Now, I want you to understand something. The pre-work for you to get people ready to read your book is something that happens way before you even decide that you're going to write one. You do that way ahead of time. So this book right here, I was giving game to my audience before I even knew that I was going to write this book. Everybody heard what I just said? I was giving game to my audience before I even knew I was going to write that. So the next book that I'm going to write, that I don't even know what that book's going to be, I'm already building a relationship with my audience so that when it's time for me to put a book out, I'm not now just start coming to my audience and saying, all right, well, let me start giving y'all something because I'm going to try to sell you something in 3 months or 6 weeks or something like that. You start building that audience. You start building your audience way early. So I was building an audience for years before I ever tried to sell anything. So this is the thing that a lot of authors don't get, because a lot of authors are focused on the author part. They're so focused on, well, I wrote a book. And again, because you're so connected and so in on what you wrote, you think everybody else is going to think your book is so great. But understand, they don't know what you know. All right, they didn't read the book. They don't know what's in it the way that you know what's in it. So this is why you got to start preparing ahead of time for getting people to know about your book. Second thing, or next thing on this point, because we're talking right now while you're in the process of writing your book, having a second set of eyes look at it will help. That will always help, depending on the type of book that you're writing. Now, different types of books, maybe this will matter more or less depending on what you're doing. But if you're writing a book like The Third Day, or a book like my book, Work on Your Game, a book like that, nonfiction, it will help to have somebody else take a look at it, even if you're writing fiction. But I'm talking specifically about nonfiction for anybody who's like intellectual property, knowledge, entrepreneurs, is have another person look at it, make sure that, of course, for the grammatical and spelling errors and stuff like that, but also the reason you have other people look at it, just to make sure the stuff that you're saying, does it make sense to a set of eyes and to a brain who doesn't have your knowledge and doesn't have your experience? Does it make sense? Because again, when we are too close to our own information, sometimes we skip over stuff and we gloss over things and we assume that our reader understands things that we understand very easily, and we assume that they know the same stuff that they know the same stuff that we know. Most of the time, they do not. So make sure you get another set of eyes to look at what you are doing. Here's the next thing. When it comes to writing a book, nobody cares about your story. This is a very important thing. A lot of people who I come across who want to write a book, and they're telling me about the book that they're writing, and people tell me about the books they're writing all the time simply because I've written so many of them, and especially entrepreneurs. And because us as entrepreneurs, we have all these ideas, we have these talents, and we have these things that we want to put out into the world. We're going to go against the grain. We're not going to go the normal way and go work for somebody else. We want to work for ourselves. And we believe we have this amazing, dynamic story that will be motivational and inspirational and informational to everybody else out there in the world. And we want to tell our story. And you want to tell your story through speeches. You want to tell your story through your book. You want to tell it through your social media posts and whatever it is that you're doing. Understand something. Nobody cares about your story. Nobody cares about your story. Your story is not that important to anybody in the world except maybe your mom and your grandmom, maybe your children, if you have any. And that's it. Not even your significant other. They don't care about your story that much. I mean, they already know it. They don't want to hear it no more. But other people don't care about your story as much as you do. Your story is only really that important to you. Only time people want to hear about your story is two times people want to hear about your story. Number one, if you are really famous. So if you're somebody like Oprah, Michelle Obama, who else? You're the president of the United States. Very, very famous athlete, Michael Jordan, Serena Williams, Wayne Gretzky, something like that. People want to know about your story because you are so famous that people just want to know, people just want to relive it. If they are listening to your story, they probably know a lot about it already because they were already following you, and that's why they're interested in you. Right? You read Michelle Obama's book. I have her book. I ain't even read it yet. But people who are big fans of hers, they already know a little bit about her background, at least, because you followed her all those years. Now you're reading the book because you just want to relive it because you enjoyed it so much. It's like watching a movie 2 times. But for all the rest of us, If you're not that famous, people don't really care about your story like that. And there might be a small niche of people. Like I told you, my first book was me telling my story and when I first came up playing ball. But it wasn't so much because people were just huge fanatics of me. Yes, I did have a fan base. What they really wanted to know was, what was the mentality and what were the actions that I took in order to go from point A to point B, because they were trying to go from point A to point B. So my story was me just giving them, they were just looking for ideas for how they could do the same thing themselves, or maybe to be motivated or inspired by it. It wasn't so much that it was me, necessarily just me. It could have been anybody, and they fulfilled the same thing that I had done, fulfilled the same role. They could have been the one telling their story. People don't really care about your story. The only time people care about your story is, again, if you are so famous that people just want to know about you, and that's a small percentage of people, or B, when you are telling your story in such a way that people can glean some insight from that story and they can use it in their own lives. And in that case, your job is to tell them what the insights are. Don't expect them to read between the lines. If all you're doing is just telling your story and hoping that they get it, that's not going to work. So in this book right here, Work on Your Game, this book I told pretty much my story from when I first started, actually from my childhood up through, I didn't spend a lot of time on childhood. I really started kind of like at college. From that point up through my adult years, through professional sports and then into entrepreneurship, is all covered in this book. But understand, the book is not about me. This is not a memoir. It's not my personal story. This book is a business book where I lay out the philosophy of Work on Your Game, and I just use situations from my life to explain why each point is each point. That's what I do here in this book. That's what you'll be doing if you're going to tell your story in a book. Unless, of course, you were like the first lady, or you were the president, or you are a super famous athlete with 20 million fans. Then people want to know your story. Other than that, people don't really care about your story. Even if you got a lot of followers on social media, that doesn't mean people care about your story. They don't like you that much. All right, they just like you enough that they'll look at your pictures. But that does not mean they want to sit there and read your entire life story. So once you have your book done, here are the next things that a lot of people do not understand. Now you got to sell the book. I said this earlier. This is the important part. Entrepreneurs, just because you created something doesn't mean people are going to buy it. I was just on my mastermind call today, and I was talking to an entrepreneur, and everybody in my mastermind is entrepreneurs, and a lot of entrepreneurs have these ideas. This is the thing that makes us entrepreneurs. We have all these ideas, these things we want to execute, and again, we don't want to follow the traditional path. We want to do our own thing. And entrepreneurs get these ideas and they buy into their own ideas, which you should do, but then they just start to think that the world is just going to beat a path to your door and buy all your stuff just because you created it. That is not the case. Just because you created something doesn't mean anybody else in the world cares about it. You need to make them care. And this is work that you do before you create the product. This is why you need to find out what does whoever you want to help, what do they actually want? It might not be the same thing that you're putting out. And this is the background work that you have to do as an entrepreneur if you're going to sell anything. So this is now you have to go sell it. After you write a book, you have to already have a plan. Hopefully you already got a plan on how you're going to sell the book. How is anybody going to know about it? Who are you going to sell it to? What's the angle of the book? What is the benefit that people get from it? What's the outcome they get if they read the book, follow it, and apply what you say? What are they actually going to get? Do you have an answer to the question? If you don't, what you have is a problem. You got a product that you might not be able to sell. Next thing is the best marketing for your book is to have another book. Why? Because if your first book doesn't do too well, the next one's good, then people at least give you a trial on people try the next book. The next one's great, then they'll say, all right, let me go try that previous one. Maybe the other one's just as good. So the best marketing for one book is having another book. And this is why I write several books. Any of you been through any of my sales funnels, you've seen any of my ads on social media, you go through any of my sales funnels, you see I'm going to offer you more than one book. I'm not going to give you just one. Who reads one book? Anybody who reads is going to read multiple books. And people who don't read, they're going to read 0 books. So the best marketing for one book is another book. And usually something you talk about in book 1, there's something else you could talk about that goes into book 2. But that requires you being able to sit down and actually do the writing. So I'm not going to assume that you can do that. But that's the best marketing for books, is to move on to the next one. And I got episodes of my podcast where I talk about all this stuff. Any of you want to go into more detail. And the third point here is, what is the next thing? Because a book, You can get this book for free. It's $9.95 shipping and handling. If you want to get it off Amazon, you can get it for $20 on Amazon. You want to get the hardcover book, you can get it for $25 on Amazon. And here's the thing, though. How many $25 books you got to sell to create the kind of business that you want, or to live the kind of lifestyle that you want, or make the kind of money that you want? What's the next thing after somebody buys your book? So somebody buys your book and they got all the value out of it. They read it. They applied everything that you said. What's the next thing that they need to do after they read your book? Should they read another one of your books? Should they join one of your courses? Should they sign up for your mastermind? Should they become a coaching client? Should they come to your live event? Should they go to your week-long retreat in Cancun? What's the next thing that they should do after they read your book? What is the next thing for them? You, as the entrepreneur, you're the leader. And when you build an audience, literally on social media, they call them followers. When you have followers, you got to tell them what to do next. If you don't tell your followers what to do next, they're not going to do anything, at least not with you. They're going to go do something with somebody who is telling them what to do next. People want to be told what to do. So you need to figure out, before you do any of this, you need to have all this laid out clearly to you. What is the next thing that they need to do after they read my book? All right, do not just leave them hanging and not tell them what the next step is, because again, they're going to take a next step. They're just going to take it with somebody other than you, which means their money is going in somebody else's pocket when it should be going in yours, if you would have just followed the process, if you knew what you were doing. But if you hadn't thought about these things, you didn't know these things, well, then you're going to be dead in the water because you didn't even know what I just said. So with all that said, these are the things that a lot of people don't know about book writing. And the most important ones of everything that I said here is, number one, you need to be thinking about how you're going to get your book into people's hands while you're still writing it. Don't wait till the book's done and then say to yourself, damn, now what am I going to do? Think about how you're going to get your book in other people's hands. A lot of people don't think about this. Number two, nobody really cares about your story. Number three, you need to tell people what's the next thing they should do. So somebody reads your book and follows everything you say. What's the next thing that they should do? 1, 2, 3. Everything that I said, these are 3 things that I want you to remember. Any of you who is a book writer. So if somebody has a question about anything that I just said here, go ahead and post it in the comment section. I'll address it. My live event, Work on Your Game Live, is taking place this upcoming Thursday. May 5th and 6th is a 2-day event, virtual event. You can attend it from the comfort of your own home. You do need a ticket to catch access to all the replays. That is at workonyourgame.live. You must have a ticket to get access to the replays. So if you miss a day, you can catch it on the replay, but you must have a ticket in order to get the replays. Let me see. Somebody asked me about basketball videos. Let's see. Yes, they do not even care. Is it safe to say your first book is to heal yourself? It can be. My first book was not to heal myself. My first book was literally the reason that I said. I was telling my story because that's what people were asking me for. I was giving my audience what they asked for. Daberdine said, who do you use to print your books? Well, I got a bunch of different books, so it depends. But one place you can print a book that doesn't cost you, well, it does cost you. You can use Amazon KDP, and they'll print the book at cost, which means you only pay the actual cost of printing the book. You know who Amazon is. So let's see. Said, I write a book because I love typing, but English wasn't my strong suit. That's not a good enough reason to write a book. So if that's your reason for writing a book, you shouldn't do it. Not because of English. Don't write a book because you love typing. If you love typing, get a job as a secretary. That's what you should do if you love typing. You can write a book. A good reason for everybody to write a book, if you just want to make sure that your life is documented, you could give it to your kids or your grandkids. That's a good reason to write a book. That doesn't have to be a book to sell. That doesn't have to be like a book for your business. That could be a book just for your family. So, for example, if my grandma wrote a book, she doesn't have to put it out to try to sell it. She could write a book, and then everybody in the family can read it so that we know the history of the family, at least from the oldest person that is still around. That's a good reason to write a book for anybody. But other than that, don't write a book just to write it, or just because you see that it is out there. So what time is it? It's 3:30. Excuse me. Like a diary. Yeah, for yourself and your family, maybe your kids could read it, something like that. But other than that, no. Don't write a book just to say that you did it. It probably wouldn't be a good use of your time. That's what I would suggest to anybody who's thinking about writing one, because you heard about it. So with all that said, I'm gonna wrap this one up. I wanted to do a quick one here today, talk about book writing, but I'm gonna do more. Today is Saturday, so going into this week, we got Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I'll be talking more on some topics that are related to what Work on Your Game Live is going to be about. That is starting on Thursday. Again, workonyourgame.live is where you get your ticket. That link is in my bio on Instagram. So any of you watching on IG, link is in my bio, but it will only be up there until Wednesday. The event starts Thursday, so Wednesday is the last day to get your ticket. Workonyourgame.live. So if you're watching this on replay on YouTube or on IG and it's after May 4th, 2022, then it is too late to get your ticket to this event. Just send me a DM. I'll tell you how you can work with me otherwise if you missed your ticket to this event. But don't miss your ticket to this event if you're watching this live. Workonyourgame.live. Everybody have a good Saturday. We out of here.